I had always dreamt of being an illustrator, and when I got my first job, I was so excited. Even my boss could tell how much I enjoyed it and awarded me the Best Employee of the Year award. It honestly felt like a dream come true, and finally had a way to pay my college tuition. But this also meant that I had to work from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and then study from 7 p.m. onwards. Many people might say that it was impossible to do, but not for me. For the first time, I finally felt like I had control over my own life. Then one day, as I was going into the office, my coworkers introduced me to an old intern that used to work there. My boss was really adamant about setting up a date between us, and it made me feel really uncomfortable. I tried to change the subject, but he wouldn't budge, and when I went to sit at my desk, my coworker had moved their things just so the old intern could sit next to me. I tried to ignore him as much as I could so he would get the picture and leave me alone, because I really wasn't interested in dating. I had a career and my family to think about. I had no time for anything else, let alone a date. But I also didn't want to be rude. I knew that my boss had asked him to come, so I figured that we could be friends instead. I tried to act as I normally would, but he started getting the wrong idea, and after 2 months of being friends, he asked me out. I gently told him that I was not interested in dating anyone, and that I was happy just being his friend. But after that day, he started getting very touchy. He would touch me on the arm or on my thigh, and I would tell him every time that I was uncomfortable, but all he would do is apologize and do it again. 1 week later, it had started to get really busy and everyone was forced to work overtime. A few of my coworkers and I decided to stay late because we had to finish a major project by Monday. When the old intern decided to tag along, I didn't understand why no one told him to leave, but I let it slide. I was way too tired to deal with him and just focused on getting the project done. Everyone ended up sleeping at the office because it was too late to go home, and we would have work early the next morning anyways. So people slept wherever they could, around the floor or the sofas. After we ate some food, I was so tired that I went to lie down on the closest sofa I could find. Everyone else was finding places to sleep when the lights were turned off, and soon after that, I passed out. When suddenly, I was awoken by weird noises coming from my left ear. I tried to move my head, but I was so tired that I couldn't even open my eyes. Then, a hand grabbed my neck tightly. I was so out of it that it took me a few moments to realize what was happening, but when I opened my eyes, I saw the old intern on top of me. I tried to scream, but he put his lips onto mine. I froze with fear. I didn't know what to do. I tried to look around for help, but all I could see was his face on top of mine. So I did the only thing I could do and kneed him hard. He fell onto the floor in pain, while I got up from the sofa and ran out of the room, and I didn't stop until I got to the bathroom. I was so afraid that he might come after me that I locked myself in the stall in complete darkness and sobbed quietly. After that night, I couldn't look at anyone. I left as soon as I could and cried myself to sleep. I also stopped talking to him completely, and whenever he tried to come close to me, I would run away. My boss thought I was being really rude and cold, but I had a right to be. I couldn't tell anyone because they would have taken his side and thought that I was being ungrateful for not liking him back. I hated going to work and stopped interacting with my coworkers. There was nothing I could do. I had no choice but to keep going there every single day. Then, 1 month later, my boss came in to tell everyone that the old intern was going to officially join the team again. My stomach dropped. I didn't want to see his face again. And now, I'll have no choice but to see him every day. It got even worse when he was chosen as my partner for a new project. I constantly felt like I was going to cry, but I didn't want to break down at work because everyone thought that I was being ungrateful and cold. I promised myself that I would get through this project and never speak to him again. But he wouldn't leave me alone. He would constantly ask me why I was being weird. Why didn't I like him back? I told him that I only wanted to talk about work, but he wouldn't listen. I started to feel really frustrated. He didn't think that he had done anything wrong. He hurt me. But I tried to keep my chill. I didn't want to lose my job. I needed it to pay for my school, and it broke me that I couldn't enjoy what I loved. I focused on trying to push him to work, but it only seemed to escalate his behavior. He stopped doing anything and sulked all the time. I ended up having to pick up the slack, which made me decide to go to my boss and report his work habits. But my boss blamed me. He said I was being too sensitive, that he was new and it was my job to help him. I felt abandoned, but there was nothing I could do. I had to keep working. I was working so much that I could only sleep for 3 hours a day. I was so sleep deprived and my mood was all over the place. Then one day, I snapped. I saw him slacking off again, and this time I couldn't contain my anger. I called him a useless... Everyone could hear me, but I didn't care anymore. I quit the project. I refused to do any more work with him. I stormed out of the office, trying to calm down. A few hours later, I was called to the boss's office. He said that he was disappointed in me and that it was my fault that we couldn't work together. I felt bad for reacting in the way I did and apologized for my behavior. But what I heard next broke me. That guy had filed a report against me, saying that I was unprofessional and that I had verbally bashed him. The worst part of it all was that my boss believed him over me. I was so upset. I couldn't believe he would do that to me. But I was more hurt that my boss trusted another man's opinion over mine and ignored my loyalty for 2 years. He called me unprofessional even though that guy had made unwanted advances onto me. I thought the boss would at least hear me out, but this showed that I could no longer work in such a toxic environment. I did the only thing I could do. I resigned. At first, I felt free, but as soon as I got home, I started to feel like I was suffocating. I couldn't face my family and tell them what had happened. They relied on me for financial support and would be disappointed in me because I would constantly tell my parents how proud I was to work there, that it was the best office ever. And now, I am ashamed that I ever had these thoughts. My boss never cared, and that guy was able to get away with what he did to me. Now, I had no job to pay for college or support my family. I knew I had done the right thing, but I couldn't help but feel the consequences of my actions. I got into a really bad funk. I dropped out of school, stopped eating, and barely left my house. I didn't know how to deal with what happened to me, and I felt so alone in my pain. I just didn't know how to talk to anyone. But in my anger, I also realized that I had allowed this guy to still hold power over me. I pushed myself to move on and knew that I couldn't live in this town any longer. I needed to move away so I could support my family and finally heal. It was hard and scary moving into a new place, and for the first few months, I was all alone with no family or friends. But after a while, I finally felt relief, like I could breathe again. I am no longer constantly reminded of all the bad memories, and I am a lot more financially stable now. I can pay for my family's living completely and go back to school. But the biggest thing through it all was that I realized that God has His own way of leading people to a better place. And I believe those scary, unpleasant experiences have made me stronger than I ever was before.